Do have a quorum. I don't see Luis, the planning director. I don't see him on yet.
I am here. Thank you, Sonia.
Then we're good to start.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the May 14, 2021 St. Paul Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is being held remotely as it's not practical nor prudent for the Planning Commission and its committees to meet in person or pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. In light of the ongoing pandemic, it's not feasible for any member to be present at a regular location, and all members will attend this meeting by telephone or other electronic means. So we will begin this meeting by doing a roll call. Sonia, could you do that, please?
Commissioner Anderson? Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Here.
Commissioner Grill?
Here.
Commissioner Hood?
Here.
Commissioner Holst?
Here.
Commissioner Kantner?
Here.
Commissioner McMurtry? Commissioner Mitchell?
Here.
Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Perryman?
Here.
Commissioner Presley?
Here.
Commissioner Riley? Commissioner Reisberg?
Here.
Commissioner Said?
Here.
Commissioner Tagioff?
Here.
Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Commissioner Underwood?
Here.
Commissioner Yang?
Here.
And of course, the chair.
Here. So we will move on with the agenda. The first item on the agenda is any announcements by me. I don't have any announcements at this time. Luis, do you have any announcements for the commission?
Chair, yes. Good morning. Very briefly, just wanted to point out, some of you may have been following the Capital City Bikeway project. This week, the City Council did approve Wabasha Street as the western leg of that. So basically, Kellogg, from Kellogg on Wabasha up to 10th, and then it actually jogs St. Peter up to St. John Ireland. So that was a milestone in that project. More to come with the design phase of that. And then second, I just wanted to point out and welcome, we have a few special guests today with us, associated with item number 4 on the agenda, which is an informational presentation. So we'll have the Deputy Mayor here, Jamie Tincher. We also have our Director of Department of Safety Inspections, Ricardo Cervantes, and Deputy Director Travis Bistudou. Senior Commander of SPPD, Jeremy Ellison, as well as a couple of county colleagues that will be here as well. So just wanted to offer a warm welcome to them and look forward to that presentation. Thank you for joining us. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pereira. The next item on the agenda is the Zoning Committee. Commissioner Baker.
Thanks, Chair. So for the upcoming site plan review meeting scheduled for Tuesday, May 18th, there are no items, so that meeting has been canceled. For our upcoming zoning committee meeting, we have 2 items. 240 Sycamore Street West is a conditional use permit for motor vehicle salvage operation. And then 733 Grand Avenue is a conditional use permit for a bank drive-through service lane. So for the report out, we had 3 items at our May 6th sixth zoning committee meeting. The first one was 385 Topping Street. This is a rezoning from B1 local business to T2 traditional neighborhood. The previous owner, Excel Energy, received a demolition permit in 2009 to remove a chain link fence and a small concrete structure. Since 2009, the site has remained vacant. The applicant is proposing to build housing on the site, which is currently not an allowed use in B1 district. The applicant also didn't provide any details of a plan and stated that they're in the process of planning. So no specifics on the project. Staff found that all findings for the application they were met. The district council did submit a letter of support for the application. There was no one who spoke in support of the application during the public hearing, and there was one person who spoke in opposition. There was no letters of support and one letter in opposition for this application, which was submitted to us. Based on that, the zoning committee voted 7-0 in favor to rezone 385 Topping Street from B1 local business to T2 traditional neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Is there any discussions on the motion coming out of committee? Seeing none, Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Anderson? She must not be. Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner Holst?
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry? Okay, he's not here. Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman? Commissioner Perryman?
Yes.
Commissioner Presley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagioff?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood?
Yes.
Commissioner Yang?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you, Sonia. The motion for rezoning at 385 Topping is approved. Commissioner Baker?
Thanks, Chair. The next item is 549 Minnehaha Avenue East. This was a reestablishment of a non-conforming use to permit a theater arts teaching studio. The building has been vacant since 2018. It was previously an embroidery screen print business on the ground floor and residential above. It has contained mixed residential commercial uses since at least 1975. Yes. The applicant purchased the building he says he's purchased the building as his home and plans to run classes out of the property. The applicant currently runs a theater business teaching actors and stated that there should be no more than 10 people in the building for the business at one time. Staff found that all of the findings were met for this application. There was no one who spoke in favor or in opposition of the application during the public hearing. In addition, there were no letters submitted in support or opposition for this application. The zoning committee voted 7-0 in favor of the reestablishment of non-conforming use to permit a theater arts studio, teaching studio at 549 Minnehaha Avenue East.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Any discussion regarding the motion coming from committee? Commissioner Holst?
Can I get some explanation on the cup here? The number of students is limited to 13 if the instructor lives on site, or 10 if the instructor lives off site. Just some better understanding of that, please.
Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, through the chair, we definitely have staff here for that. That was a part of the staff's report. We asked the applicant specifically about the number of people he planned to have on site, and that's where I got the 10 from. But I will call up staff to provide more information around the rationale of the staff's report.
Chair, Commissioner, that's a very good question. Commissioner Tegehoff had a similar question. Those numbers 10 and 13 come from the parking requirements, the minimum parking requirements. And they are equivalent to the previous business's parking requirements. So if the number of students is either 10 or 13, depending on whether the instructor lives on site, it's the same or less parking requirement as the previous use. And so that was used as an equivalency about impact to the neighborhood of this particular use. And the as Commissioner Baker stated, the applicant is fine with those limitations and intends to operate within them.
Any addition, Commissioner Host?
So I guess I personally like to see the cup removed. I mean, maybe the current owner's fine with it, but this would, stay with the property, not with the ownership, particularly in light of how we're looking at reducing parking minimums potentially in the future here. If this is a parking minimum sort of based cup, I guess my opinion would be it should be removed. So
Through the chair. Through the chair. So, Commissioner Host, I understand what you're saying, and knowing we're having that conversation and we are talking about parking minimums as we've been talking about parking maximums. And I could see that. My only thought is I would like for that process to play out. So we specifically have guidance. There's nothing that precludes us from. Well, I'll defer to staff on this. I don't know if there's anything that precludes us from removing the cup, but in light of the conversations that we've had over the last few months around parking, I would like specific direction before we start to make decisions based on what we've been hearing from staff. It's just my suggestion.
Through the chair, if I may, this cup, for example, if parking minimums are reduced, this cup stays in place because it doesn't really talk about parking per se, right? It talks about the number of people that live there. And again, I know we're in a housing shortage in the city of St. Paul. I'll be opposed to this piece of the conditional use permit. If something it said where it disappears if parking, I don't know, but it just seems like an unnecessary restriction here. And 3 isn't that many difference, right? 10 to 3. So.
Any additional discussion? Mr. Dermody?
Thank you, Chair Rouse. I would suggest if the commission was inclined to remove the condition, that the findings be modified to support that. There are a couple of findings that say that they can be met only if the number of students are limited, and you would need to have something else such as just simply the finding is met due to the size of the establishment or the size of the business or something like that you feel would similarly limit negative impact. But you would need to amend the findings somehow.
Commissioner Grill and then Commissioner Tagia.
This is Commissioner Grill. I appreciate Commissioner Holt's intention, and I wish we had covered this in greater detail during the actual zoning committee meeting. I don't feel comfortable modifying the findings on the fly, just because it is a zoning case and because we are making a determination about a specific property. It does make me nervous changing things and then changing them particularly about something that we don't have. We can't point to the new parking rules and say this is why we're changing the requirement. I wish we already had I wish you already had parking in place so that we could handle this more clearly. But it does make me nervous going through and changing the findings when we don't have, like Chair Baker said, something to point to.
Commissioner Tagioff and then Commissioner Hood.
Thank you, Chair. A perspective that I've had on this is that although the 13 and 10 is perhaps derived from parking, I read it as an attempt to reasonably limit the amount of people in the building, given that that's a residential area. So there's a desire to kind of limit people, not necessarily parking in this case. At least that's how I read it.
Commissioner Hood and then Commissioner Kantner.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate Commissioner Grill's point on this. I think this is a good case study to take into the conversations that we're going to have shortly or in the near future about parking minimums. I think it would make a lot of people's lives a lot easier if we reevaluated those and voted accordingly. So thank you very much, and appreciate all the comments on that. And for Commissioner Holst, I understand where you're coming from, and I agree. However, since the applicant is okay with what we have here and is okay with that moving forward, that's how I plan to vote. Thank you.
Commissioner Kantner.
Yeah, I just had a question, just looking at the wording. Is it limited to 13 and 10 at a time or overall?
Mr. Dermody.
Chair, Commissioner, the intent is at a time.
Thank you. That's helpful. I don't know if there's a way we could just clarify that somewhere, or maybe it is in the final resolution. I was just looking at the staff recommendation.
So the motion coming out of, excuse me, Mr. Dermody.
Chair, Commissioner Kantner, to answer that question, it is not specified in the condition. You could certainly add that language if you wished.
Okay, so the motion coming out of committee is to approve the reestablishment with the conditions. I just want to briefly address what Commissioner Grill stated, and I think I disagree with that. I think if there's a commissioner that wants to vote no, they would just be required to state the reasons for voting no, and then that commissioner could bring a motion if they can articulate the language that they would need to be able to change the findings. That would be for findings 2 and 3. And we could do that today. It does not, there wouldn't be anything that would impede a commissioner from being able to do that during the meeting today. But the motion coming out of committee right now is to approve, so we do need to take a vote on that. Is there any addition, Commissioner Holst? Commissioner Holst?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Could I get a little clarification, Bill, on what you suggested on what might be, how the cup might be modified? You said just some additional language. Could you give me a suggestion on what that might look like?
Commissioner Holst, as the chair noted, findings 2.2 and 2.3 are the ones that you may wish to change the language on if you are concerned about not tying this to parking and getting rid of the numbers 10 and 13. And those currently say, finding number 2 is the proposed use is equally or more appropriate to the district than the previous use. And this finding can be met if the intensity of the business is limited by limiting the number of students. I would suggest just getting rid of by limiting the number of students. So that just says this finding can be met if the intensity of the business is limited. Or you could replace that final phrase by saying this finding is met because of the size of the business. Finding number 3, I'm not sure you actually even need to change this finding, but you may wish to. It's the finding is about the proposed use will not be detrimental to the existing character in the area, basically. This finding can be met if the intensity of the business is limited to avoid negative traffic or parking impacts. You could simply say this finding is met and leave it at that. So those are some on-the-fly rewordings you may wish to consider.
Commissioner Baker.
Thanks, Chair. Also, thanks, Mr. Dermody. And I just want to reiterate, highlight before we vote. We end up being in these situations a lot when we are having issues or concerns with certain topics. We talked about the IZ study, and then where we had frustration or concern as commissioners was trying to incorporate one-offs within applications to deal with some of the concerns that we had. And so my suggestion, and before we vote, is for commissioners to think through. We do want to make sure that there's a change in parking. I think that one of the best ways, in my estimation, to be able to do that is if we are able to move forward, support and push the city to provide us guidance when it comes to the parking, and then that supports us at zoning committee to be able to be more consistent within this, because if we're not, what we end up doing is saying yes or no to some of these things for different applicants. And I want to try to make sure that we are consistent in our approach each and every time we deal with a zoning application. So I just say that this is important, and I do think that we need to do something around parking. I do agree in the spirit of what Commissioner Holt said. However, I would like to make sure that we have guidance so we can consistently consistently do this, but also not be inequitable in our approach.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker, for your comments. So again, the motion right now is to approve. Commissioner Kantner.
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Baker, would you accept, I'm not sure if you'd be the one or someone from your committee, would you accept a friendly amendment to just specify, the number of students at a time is limited to 13 or 10?
So Commissioner
Baker? Through the chair, I would accept that friendly amendment.
So Luis, is that something that the chair can do as he's the chair of the zoning committee?
Chair, that's my understanding. The motion is coming from the committees, and the chair is simply communicating it. So I think that's appropriate. I think we just want to be clear about what the amendment is. If we're striking part of what's written there in the resolution, what part of it and how. So just for further clarification would be helpful before the vote happens.
So I'll call on Commissioner Kantner. Commissioner Kantner, what is your amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just the last on number 1, after it says now therefore be resolved, just add the words. So it would say the number of students at one time is limited to 13 if the instructor lives on site, or 10 if the instructor lives off site.
Okay, so it's just adding language. And Commissioner Baker, is that okay with you?
It is, and the rationale is because it's clarifying what we understand to be true, or what we discussed. Okay. So I am comfortable with that.
Commissioner Grill.
I'm comfortable as well. I just, if there was a question about whether or not other members of the zoning committee were comfortable with it, I am as well.
Okay. So again, the motion is to approve with the amendment adding the clarificating language at one time. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Okay, Commissioner Underwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy, DeJoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner Taggia,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
unanimous.
All right, so that motion is approved. Commissioner Baker?
Thanks, Chair. We have one last item. It's 300 Banfield Street. Variances for, bear with me, front yard setback proposed 1 feet, rear yard setback proposed 1 feet, south side yard setback, which is proposed 6 feet 3 inches, and then north side yard setback, which is proposed for 1 feet. And parking, and the proposal is 2 spaces. This property actually should be familiar to everybody because it came before us during our last planning commission meeting. It was a rezoning approval. They are now back for the requested variances. So if you remember, this site had been vacant since at least 1940, and it's a proposed project of 2 duplexes on the lot. Currently, there's a billboard on the site that will be removed with the proposed development. So staff found that all findings and conditions were met for this application. The district council did not submit a letter of recommendation for the application at the time of the zoning committee meeting. However, the applicant highlighted a meeting back in March with the district council before applying for the rezoning and variances and received initial feedback. The applicant also stated that outreach was done in the neighborhood about the proposed project. There was no one who spoke in favor of the application and 1 person who spoke in opposition during the public hearing. There were 2 letters of support submitted and no letters of opposition. There was a discussion amongst the zoning committee, and the committee voted 7-0 in favor to allow the said variances. I should just read them for the record. So the zoning committee voted 7-0 in favor to allow 1 foot front yard setback, 1 foot rear yard setback, 6 feet 3 inches south side yard setback, and 1 foot north side yard setback, and approval of the off-street parking variances of 2 spaces. However, it was subject to 3 conditions. The first one is final approval be made by the zoning administrator for the use of the site. Number 2, an easement agreement certified by the city building official for conformance with the state building code. And then number 3, a no build easement agreement of 6 feet from the southern property line to allow for fire protection and building maintenance access. And that is the recommendation coming from committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, can we get, Sonia, can we get a roll call on 300 Banfield, the variance for front yard, rear yard, south side yard, and parking?
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yeah.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang, Commissioner Yang,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
unanimous.
All right, the variances for 300 Banfield are approved. And I believe that concludes your report. Is that correct, Commissioner Baker?
That is correct, Chair.
All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda is an informational presentation on the impacts of the pandemic and our residents experiencing homelessness and this city-county partnership. And I believe this was Director Pereira, along with various other directors from the city and the Deputy Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for providing time on your agenda for us today. My name is Jamie Tincher. I'm the Deputy Mayor in the City of St. Paul. I have a number of my colleagues that are listed here on that first slide that are with me today, and we'll go through a few slides, and then we're happy to have a discussion, answer questions that you may have. We're going to provide a brief history of how we approached the work of supporting our residents experiencing homelessness prior to the pandemic, review the challenges COVID-19 created and the impacts to our programming and services, go over the strategies we pursued to address the needs and our plans for future work. Our challenge last year was that we needed to act very quickly to have additional capacity before the cold weather arrived and before the COVID relief funding expired on December 31st, 2020. Our opportunity then, like now, was that we had new federal funding that we could invest in long-term strategic ways that would serve our residents experiencing homelessness, not just through the COVID pandemic, but well into the future. We can go to slide 2. The following slide provides a view of where encampments have been located in St. Paul. The green dots are locations that are no longer there. The gray dots are abandoned and we are scheduling a cleanup. The red dots are locations where individuals are currently staying, and we're working to connect them to indoor options. If you go to slide 3, we just removed the green dots so you could better see our current situation. Since 2018, the City of St. Paul has collected this information on encampment locations in order to monitor the health and safety of occupants and to ensure we are doing everything we can to connect them to services. Prior to COVID, our standard operating procedures were when an encampment location was reported to the city, staff would go to the location and conduct an initial wellness check. We would track the GIS location of the encampment as well as information that did not specifically identify individual occupants. Then at weekly meetings, city staff, outreach, and other partners would review each site together to work to ensure that occupants were being connected to caseworkers for housing and other resources or services. Prior to COVID, we also closed encampments on a site-by-site basis. The city would assess risk factors such as dangers posed by physical location, including weather conditions, environmental and health hazards, reports of violence, trafficking, or other criminal behavior, size and duration of the encampment, including buildup of trash or waste. Prior to closing a site, the city would provide notice to the occupants and outreach workers in order to minimize the loss of property or personal documents. We would also offer Ramsey County congregate shelter space to occupants. We can go to slide 4. You can see that the COVID pandemic caused an unprecedented rise in the numbers of homeless encampments and unsheltered individuals in the city of St. Paul. As you know, there are a few different definitions of homelessness that are used for various public policy purposes. But for St. Paul and the data that we're tracking, when we refer to unsheltered homeless individuals, it's the people in our city that we know are sheltering in tents, under bridges, in the woods, in caves, or other places that are not intended as shelter. In this graph, if it extended back through 2019, you would see a steady line at less than 30 individuals sheltering outdoors in any given week. Our highest weekly counts through our monitoring process was in October of that year at 19 occupied sites and 26 individuals sheltering outdoors. And you can see that when COVID hit in early 2020, our numbers began increasing. At the end of March 2020, we had 20 occupied sites and 42 people sheltering outdoors. By the end of April, there were 68 occupied sites and we went above 100 people sheltering outdoors. In mid-June, the numbers rose above 200 people, and in late July, the counts went above 300. And we reached a high of 380 people sheltering outdoors before we began turning that curve. We can go to slide 5. That was what was happening outdoors, but this flow chart helps show what was happening indoors with programming and services. COVID was basically a perfect storm of conditions that resulted in dramatic increases of people sheltering outdoors. Many people who had previously transitioned in and out of shelter and other supports by doubling up or staying periodically with friends or family could no longer find those options due to the need to isolate. Shelters immediately had to reduce their capacity by 50% in order to implement COVID social distancing safety measures. Options for anyone already struggling on the margins dramatically decreased. So anyone financially impacted by COVID and thereby pushed into homelessness also had incredibly limited options. This chart shows the programming and services available to our residents experiencing homelessness. In gray, the 24/7 shelter spaces. In red, the emergency overnight shelter space. In yellow, the options for day space services. And in green, the spaces for COVID response, the isolation, quarantine, and respite. The pre-COVID box shows the capacity we had prior to the pandemic. So back when we were seeing less than 30 individuals sheltering outdoors in any given week. Now, remember though, there was a large number of individuals who were doubling up because they were periodically able to stay with friends and family. And then COVID hit. We lost 24/7 space due to health and safety protocols. So Ramsey County added their hotel program. But again, that was just continuing to have the prior capacity, not increased to meet the additional need. The county also had to add space for individuals experiencing homelessness where they could go to isolate, quarantine, and have respite if they tested positive for COVID. We lost all day space service options as well as public spaces. So at that time, we moved into action planning mode, not only to add more space and staff and services and programming, but simultaneously reassessing our options to address barriers that discouraged individuals from going into shelter. Hearing directly from our residents experiencing homelessness, we knew that we needed to provide more individual rooms. We heard the privacy requests and the safety concerns related to COVID. We knew that storage of belongings and transportation were issues and challenges, and we understood that people wanted to stay with their partners and their pets. We also knew that we needed more day space options for people experiencing homelessness, a place where they could go to get support, take a shower, sleep during the day, do laundry, or just talk to someone and get a cup of coffee. We particularly needed this type of space because of COVID impacts that caused the closure of so many of our indoor public spaces, such as our public libraries. And the next few slides are where we'll go through the results we achieved toward those goals in just 4 months. So we'll go to slide 7, and I think my colleague, Director Cervantes, is going to take over.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Ricardo Cervantes. I'm the Director of the Department of Safety and Inspection with the City of St. Paul. And thank you for allowing us to provide you this information this morning. In July of 2020, understanding the historic numbers of the unsheltered individuals in St. Paul, the great need for us to build a shelter capacity that would also meet the CDC and MDH standards laid out for COVID. A team was assembled to identify potential sites that we could consider for sheltering before the extreme cold temperatures in 2020. The team was made up of individuals from DSI, which is regulatory, our PED department, which was both planning as well as some of the financial funding that was available to us, our finance department, OFS, our communications team. On the Ramsey County side, it also included their planning team, property management, and then their finance experts. Understanding that we had one-time monies that we could use, we wanted to be as strategic as possible to ensure that that money was used in a way that we could prolong the services and the sheltering options that we had available to us. We were fortunate to have a project manager assigned to the team. We also hired a real estate broker, Kimbico, again, identifying all of the properties within St. Paul that might suit our needs. Initially, we looked at over 115 properties, but given the criteria that we had laid out in front of us, we quickly reduced that list to under 50. We looked at such things as availability, configuration of the building, and whether it would suit our needs. The condition, whether it needed minimal construction or was it turnkey, were high priorities, given the short timeline before the cold weather. Accessibility, whether it had availability to transit and could people get to the facilities for sheltering. And then its location related to other supportive services, understanding that these individuals have relationships and needs for other health and social services. We wanted to make sure that those could be accessible. And then also looked at whether the building configuration would allow for additional services located at that facility. Setting out with an initial goal, understanding that, again, the height of the unsheltered homeless in our city was at about 380 individuals. I think we set a goal of 100 beds or 100 rooms to make a dent in that large number, but we far exceeded that number. I believe you all are familiar with Bethesda. Bethesda was one of the projects that came out of this group. It currently has capacity for 100 rooms, 100 beds, which again meet the criteria for the health standards for the Minnesota Health Department regarding COVID. It also has an additional 67 potential rooms for respite, and that has been activated. So currently, it has been brought to capacity, although we keep track of the numbers of beds available every week. It's remained at the very high in regards with minimal vacancy, but there is a turnover rate where individuals are leaving Bethesda and moving on to more sustainable shelter. Ramsey County had staffed Bethesda initially and are now going to be contracted with the Salvation Army to administer the program there at Bethesda. They also have some wraparound services, have a partnership and agreement with Fairview, which provides the public health aspect of service to that group that are living there. They also have a contract with Handy Help, which also provides that wraparound mental health care as well as chemical dependency. On the respite side, they've been averaging about 2 individuals, which is great news that those who are suffering from the effects of COVID have been very low numbers. And so that's been pretty standard kind of throughout the pandemic. So we've been extremely fortunate with how all the systems have been working together. Next, please. Mary Hall, and here's some photographs of some of the rooms that are most suitable for our needs currently. The capacity there is 134 rooms. It's gone through several iterations in regards to who has been serving. Initially, you may know that this was used for the College of St. Mary for nursing students, a dormitory. It then moved to an emergency overflow sheltering in the system in 2019. It then became identified as a potential site for respite. So early on in the pandemic, it was used for respite. Then it was being used again for emergency overnight, and now 24/7 facility offering all of the services similar to Bethesda. Next slide, please. We were very fortunate as we were looking at all of the potential properties that Luther Seminary, Stube Hall was available. That was a dormitory until just 2019. So we're fortunate in regards to the criteria that met its availability and has been, I would say, one of the most essential of the shelters for us, in that we saw a very large percentage of growth of females experiencing homelessness over the last 2 years. And so Luther Seminary, Stube Hall has allowed for both women focused as well as couple focused, which were some of the barriers that we were experiencing in the encampments. Folks who have relationships with others has been difficult in the past for us to house those individuals or provide some level of shelter together. And Luther Seminary has really fit that need for us. Next slide, please. We're very fortunate to have had a great partnership with the state. During the peak of our cold weather, the city had activated 2 of our recreational centers, Harriet Island on the west side and Duluth and Case on the east side. These locations were identified and quickly stood up with funding, one-time funding from the state to allow for us to open them up, keep them open until we were capable of using some of the other sites that we had identified. So during the latter part of November and December, we opened these sites with the help of our parks, again with OFS, our emergency management team, to allow for emergency congregate sheltering in the coldest months of the winter. We never intended for this to be a permanent part of our sheltering, but given the potential threat to risk of life and or loss of limb or other injuries to individuals, we were capable of standing that up and using it as a gap in the sheltering inventory. Next slide is. City staff are engaging residents in encampments throughout the city to ensure they know and that have access to indoor options that are now available in advance of closing any of those encampments. The city and the county confirm availability for any closure of any encampment to ensure that we do have ample space within the sheltering system. And we have really built out several different models to meet some of those needs. All of the options in Ramsey County Shelter Program have 24/7 staff available. The staff reflect the residents and have diverse backgrounds and experience. They work to build relationships with the residents and are CPR and Narcan trained. Again, the wraparound services are provided in all programs. They include 3 meals a day and on-site mental health services, transportation services, healthcare, and nursing. The goal is to provide pathways to housing stability with on-site benefit, housing navigation provided, as well as to support the barriers to housing. And then these folks are all trauma informed. We have security also for the facilities, and then rooted in de-escalation is provided 24/7 at all locations. All shelter operations follow the CDC and Minnesota Department of Health guidance to protect clients and staff from COVID. And shelters also have in place COVID testing protocols, and shelter staff provide services and referrals when rapid care is needed. We work with a large variety of providers. What comes to mind is the variety of different healthcare providers that have gone into the facilities with Ramsey County to ensure that individuals are getting the care and services and attention that they need. Next slide, please. Freedom House. Again, we're extremely fortunate that the St. Paul Freedom House Fire Station is available, which could, again, provide this critical need for daytime space. Freedom House has been used since early January. It is now operating from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It also was available during the extreme cold protocol periods this last winter, which allowed for up to 20 individuals or 20 beds for individuals to stay overnight. But during their normal operations, they're there to provide daytime services for people experiencing homelessness. It has a full kitchen, it has showers, laundry facilities, and semi-private areas, which used to be used for our firefighters when we were staying there, for folks to take naps during the day. It's my experience that several of the individuals that are experiencing homelessness have jobs. Some of those have jobs at night and have a very difficult time finding a place where they can just rest. And folks are often found taking naps during the day at this location. This particular need for our residents experiencing homelessness have that support for them overnight. I have to say that Freedom House serves a very critical need in that during the pandemic, many of our daytime areas for public spaces have been closed. So we have closed and reduced hours, both at our rec centers as well as our libraries, and libraries have often been used by individuals who need a warm place to be during the day. Although our libraries are reopening, they have limited hours in regards to the time people can be there. And so Freedom House really complements and supports the overnight shelter. So I had not mentioned Safe Space. There's another Ramsey County facility that's run by Model Cities, which is just overnight sheltering and some daytime services. But individuals who are staying there, and then also individuals who may be in very unstable housing, use Freedom House for all those services. It's a very inviting, welcoming space that supports the needs of those individuals. Next slide, please. I believe I'll be handing this off to my colleague, Travis Bistidu.
Thank you, Director. Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Again, my name is Travis Bistidu. I'm one of the Deputy Directors for the Department of Safety and Inspections. One of the divisions that I'm responsible for has historically taken a lead role in managing the city's homeless encampments and continues to lead much of that work, much of that field work in this space. As you can imagine, in 2020, the city learned a lot in our work managing unsheltered homeless encampments during a global pandemic. We observed many instances where unsheltered individuals were living in incredibly unsafe conditions. And it pains me to say that unfortunately, 4 individuals lost their lives living in those conditions in our city last year. As a result, the city continues to remain steadfast in our belief that living in a tent in Minnesota is not and should not be a housing option for our unsheltered citizens. Since last fall, the city has closed over 50 camps for explicit safety concerns. We continue to do so in the most humane fashion that we can, using a human-centered approach, attempting to identify individuals, learn about their individual and specific needs, coordinating our efforts with street outreach, providing low barrier shelter referrals, storage needs, and even transportation services when requested. As a result of those efforts, we know that many of the 380 individuals that we were tracking in homeless encampments last fall have utilized those new low barrier shelter rooms that Director Cervantes described that we stood up in partnership with Ramsey County. The county also estimates that of those folks that we transitioned through encampment closures to low barrier shelters, approximately 50 of those individuals have since moved up and out of those low barrier shelters and are taking advantage of additional shelter and housing resources available through the county, and now hopefully are on their journey to end their time experiencing homelessness. In 2021, the city plans to maintain our encampment closures at the same pace as we've done over the past 9 months, doing all that we can to encourage occupants to take advantage of available shelter space in our area and through our partnering agencies. And then lastly, for all of the sites that have been previously closed, the city plans to maintain those sites closed going forward. If they were to become reoccupied, we will continue to provide the same services that we have for our other closures, but following a more expedited 72-hour timeline. And with that, I will hand the presentation over to Senior Commander Jeremy Ellison for an update on the city's area action plan strategy, which dovetails with our unsheltered work. Senior Commander.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremy Ellison. I'm the Senior Commander for the Central District of the St. Paul Police Department. As you've heard from Deputy Mayor as well as the Department of Safety and Inspections, we do have a very collaborative approach to the challenges that we're seeing in St. Paul. St. Paul Police Department is just one of many partners involved in this work. As we start to see businesses and visitors returning to downtown, more resources are needed now to ensure that we have a safe and welcoming environment for everybody. Last year, we were extremely successful in using this approach in Lower Town, where we did see an increase in quality of life incidents as well as Part 1 crimes. Our approach started with community engagement and outreach. Our patrol officers, along with our Coast unit, which is our community outreach and stabilization unit, were out multiple times per day. They were engaging with people. The officers, as well as our embedded social workers, were able to provide numerous referrals in order to get services to those who were in need. Our goal was to help people and not to criminalize homelessness. This was extremely successful, like I said, and as time went on, our officers who were out there continuing to engage observed that there were people coming into the neighborhood to take advantage of the unsheltered individuals and to sell them drugs. Our officers did some specific enforcement activities and we made some arrests for these offenses. And over time, we did see a dramatic change in the neighborhood. We got a lot of positive feedback from residents about how things were handled and how things were improved. In 2021, under the leadership of Deputy Mayor Tincher as well as Chief Axtell, we have organized 4 major area action plans, and we're engaging in specific strategies designed to mitigate community complaints. These 4 areas are 5th and Cedar, 7th and Grand, which is near the Freedom House, 10th and Robert, which is near Pedro Park, as well as the Lower Town neighborhood, specifically Mears Park and the surrounding area down there. As you've heard, these strategies are not just police or law enforcement solutions. We are really working collaboratively to address the cleanliness, trash cleanups, the perception of safety, as well as the quality of life incidents, working on getting chemical dependency and mental health services to those in need. These plans are specific to the areas that are mentioned above, as well as being iterative and evaluated for their effectiveness and changes being made when necessary. Travis, if you want to go to the next slide. The overall strategy for these 4 plans is to reduce crime and increase a sense of safety and security. We're also working to improve the cleanliness, make sure that the areas are well maintained, decreasing trash and graffiti. We're also ensuring that we are working with service providers to make sure the resources and support is there for unsheltered residents of St. Paul who happen to be spending time in these areas. Our officers are out conducting foot patrols, checking in with area businesses, and ensuring that we are being responsive to the concerns. We're also doing bike patrols in the area. What we found is not surprising, right? When we get the police officers out of their squad cars, we have much more engagement, and we're more effective at meeting the needs and the expectations of our community members. As I said earlier, and as you've heard, these are collaborative plans. We've involved numerous partners. Some of them are mentioned on the slide. We're working with nearly every single city department. Metro Transit, Captain Brooke Blakey is representing the Homeless Action Team for MTC, as well as other resources that they have. The Ramsey, several departments throughout Ramsey County, including the sheriff, county attorney, both civil and criminal divisions, the St. Paul City's Attorney's Office, the Community Ambassadors Initiative, Joel Franklin's group, Downtown Alliance, and the Block by Block Clean Team or Street Team Safety Ambassadors, numerous outreach partners, the East Metro Crisis Alliance, and Heading Home Ramsey Continuum of Care, as well as others. And with that, I will turn it back over. I believe Deputy Mayor Tincher is going to do the next one.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next steps. On this slide, I've included two graphics. One, the housing continuum from the Minnesota Housing Partnership, and the other, a depiction of the homeless service system flow from Heading Home Ramsey, our continuum of care. I think these two graphics help provide focus to any policy conversations about what we need to do to better serve our residents who are experiencing homelessness. Prior to COVID, Mayor Carter and our city council, along with our partners in Ramsey County and St. Paul Public Schools, were responding to the housing crisis with a variety of strategies from across the spectrum of needs. A couple of years ago, the city really started leaning in and coordinating across departments and deepening our partnerships with the county and service providers to support the work of helping connect residents sheltering outdoors to resources. And last year, the city's approach evolved even further, from tracking numbers of people and locations of encampments to knowing their names, their stories, and their struggles. And this level of engagement by the city is going to be incredibly important as our whole community continues to grapple with how we can best prioritize investments and resources. And this helps us actually know how many people need exactly what type of housing and what strategies are required to effectively and responsibly meet each person where they are at that moment. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, you know, we have an incredible opportunity at the federal level with a lot of resources to respond to the pandemic that, you know, when we look at this system flow, our goal really is to make investments and prioritize things that are going to help our residents move into stability and into permanent housing. Our goal is that instead of investing in the emergency supports that we had to invest in at the height of the pandemic, we want to make some really strategic investments along with the county and our other partners that are actually housing permanently those folks that are most vulnerable in our community right now. And with that, we're happy to have a discussion, take questions, whatever would be helpful to this group.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there any questions for the presenters? Commissioner Moore and then Commissioner Mitchell.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Just wondering how local residents and businesses can help support all of your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have through a Neighbors Helping Neighbors program through the mayor's office, ways that neighbors can connect. Through the pandemic, we had individuals who volunteered throughout those locations in downtown and other locations to go to encampments, spend time with individuals, meet them, hand out, hand warmers, socks, a number of things. So anyone who's interested in supporting folks in those ways, as well as many of our service providers have many volunteer opportunities, as well as ways that you can donate, and whether financial or other materials and resources that you have. And I think, stopping in and getting to know the folks that run our service programs, whether it's Safe Space or Listening House, Catholic Charities, Union Gospel, signing up to volunteer, and really just talking to our residents that are experiencing homelessness and getting to know them and familiarizing yourself. They're members of our community, and I know from my experience, we just have a lot of wonderful people that we're just trying to figure out how we can keep them connected to St. Paul.
This is Commissioner Mitchell. Thank you for the presentation. My background, I worked in homelessness for many, many years. And I know this presentation was focused on encampments. Aurora St. Anthony is located in Ward 1, and our residents and our housing, we are having many homeless people get into our buildings. And so I have outreach to other nonprofits and businesses on University, and I have found out that it's increasing, and many of us, again, we do not want to criminalize our individuals who are homeless, and we've been trying to figure out how to address the situation without getting people arrested. But it is increasing on University, and if there's any resources that you could offer businesses in that corridor, it would be appreciated. We've had to hire security, and most nonprofits and for-profit businesses on University have hired some type of security. So is there anything you can help us? We would truly appreciate it.
Yes, we'll follow up after this call. And what you're speaking to, the area action plan coordination work that Senior Commander Ellison spoke about, the City of St. Paul, we really are stepping into that space and we're learning a lot. But we know that what you're speaking to, we need to do a better job of coordinating our resources and figure out what's going on in a specific location, and then what's going on with the individuals that need some help and supports, and then how do we connect them to those supports so that businesses and neighbors aren't experiencing difficult challenges, and we are focused on helping the individuals get to stability and get to resources that are going to help them. So we'll follow up with you after this call.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Grill, and then Commissioner DeJoy.
This is Commissioner Grill. Like everyone else said, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. It was really helpful, and I think very thoughtful, which I appreciate. I know how hard it is to put these things together, and looking at it, you can tell there was a lot of time and effort put in. Talking about Freedom House specifically, a lot of the complaints that we heard at the previous meeting from some of the neighborhood businesses and residents, they centered around things like, ultimately it seemed like a chunk of the complaints centered around restrooms and folks' access to like bathroom facilities. I'm curious, in the Freedom House area and in some of the other plans, you mentioned cleanliness a little bit. If there are public restroom options or plans for things like that, just trying to figure out ways to alleviate some of those complaints while providing services to folks, because it's clear there's a gap. And I realize that there's a lot you're working on, but I'm just wondering if that's part of the overall plan.
So I'll start, and then Director Cervantes or Deputy Director Bistu, if you want to weigh in as well. So we, in coordination with Councilmember Naker, we are doing an every other week check-in call with neighbors and residents and businesses in the West 7th area, just so that we can get on the call, do an update from the previous 2 weeks, take questions, and really collaborate with everyone on what are we seeing, what are some of our challenges, and how can we bring all of the resources that we can to creatively problem solve. and listening how staff is on that call as well. So we've implemented a number of things to try to get at some of the challenges that just come along with providing services in a space for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. So the city has added a lot of the maintenance and the cleanliness efforts in partnership with some really important partners. One of the discussions that we've had in those calls is, bathroom facilities and restroom facilities. And so citing porta potties in locations, there are pros and cons with that, and we're kind of grappling through those pieces. What we've heard on those calls is that that's not necessarily an option that has broad support from the folks who are concerned about the challenges with it. So we're going to continue to work with them and brainstorm, what would be some options so that we could alleviate that challenge.
Deputy Mayor, I'll just jump in as well. Commissioners, the other thought is, moving forward, our Safe Space has augmented their hours in the morning and is kind of overlapping where before, a lot of folks were being asked to leave in the morning, at the end of the day or at the end of the shift. They've now extended their hours and now have, of course, the lavatories available at Safe Space to kind of overlap some of that time period. And then with the opening of our libraries again, that adds an additional public restrooms for a period. We're hoping that, that will help alleviate some of the what we've seen initially when we didn't have those available to us.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes, Commissioner DeJoy here. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciated seeing how much St. Paul and Ramsey County is doing to help the homeless, unsheltered. I do have a question that probably expands on Commissioner Mitchell's concerns and also some of what Commissioner Grill said is because I work on a commercial corridor and we are experiencing some negative behavior that clearly, and people are hesitant to call the police just because there's a lot of compassion and it's clear that maybe somebody, for example, a man that was in the middle of traffic, trying to stop traffic, yelling obscenities, and then ultimately exposed himself is when we finally intervened and called the police. Can you just tell me what happens when the police arrive, and do people get arrested? Do they get taken to, do they get evaluated? Where is that bridge between the compassion and, law enforcement?
Thank you, Commissioner. I will start, and then Senior Commander, I'll let you weigh in as well. I think what you're tapping into is one of the things that is our highest priority right now. We have in partnership with the Heading Home Ramsey Continuum of Care, the City of St. Paul is really leaning into and thinking about strategies that could offer alternative responses to traditional law enforcement, and particularly for this, for the individuals that we're talking about, that really the needs are, whether it's mental health or chemical dependency or whatever it is, we know that there's a lot of trauma that we need to just really respond to the individuals and really think about centering that trauma is what exists, and we don't want to be trying to help an individual and further traumatize. And so we believe in St. Paul that there are some strategies where we could bring in teams that could be that first response, that would be calls that our community could make to see if we could deploy a non-law enforcement response, and we are exploring that and in partnership with St. Paul Police Department. And what I will say is that, our St. Paul Police Department spends a lot of time and a lot of thoughtfulness around how are they engaging when they are called, when they are the resource that is needed, and sort of how they approach those situations. And so I do want to give Senior Commander Ellison an opportunity to speak to that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I appreciate the question because it's really important, especially right now. Our officers, I'm really proud of the way that our officers respond to things. We do have a lot of resources at our disposal with, like I talked about, the Coast Unit where we have an embedded social worker. So, we're fortunate in St. Paul, and plus the discussions that the Deputy Mayor referenced, we know that there's better ways to handle these things, and we're going to continue working together to get to a better place. But I understand the apprehension about calling the police, but I also we again do a lot of training. Our officers go to have all gone to a 40-hour crisis intervention training. Our goal when we respond to calls for service is to help people. Like the incident that you described, where the gentleman's in the street and acting, in a manner that's concerning. If we get to that scene and we determine that they're a danger to themselves or a danger to others, we have the ability to get them to the hospital, whether that's bringing them in a police car there, whether that's preferably is typically having an ambulance bring them there, and getting them the services that they need. So we would get them a mental health evaluation, and once they're at the hospital, they would take over. So our goal, the last thing we want to do is criminalize the behavior of either mental health issues, chemical dependency issues, or unsheltered homelessness. And so we work very hard to have these individualized solutions to the problem. Our officers will evaluate things based on individual circumstances at the call location, and the last option typically is an arrest, and that's only if it's reasonable, necessary, and then again we do that with respect.
Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair, Deputy Mayor, and Commander Ellison, and everyone. I just first of all want to thank you all for the presentation that's very detailed and helpful. And I want to share a couple of stories to let the rest of my colleagues and anyone else on the call understand that this isn't just government saying that it's doing something. We have some friends. I live on the east side, and as many of you know, and it's often a place where folks say, how can you possibly live on the east side? And we have some friends who moved here from Minnetonka, and there was a gentleman just yelling outside their window for hours and hours and hours and hours. And someone in the neighborhood did call for the police. And they came and they talked to the gentleman, and they collected his belongings and called an ambulance. And that ambulance came and took that person somewhere where they could be safe. And that's something that I have witnessed many times over my decade plus of living and working in and for the city of St. Paul. And I know that the Housing Action Team at my organization is working closely with Ramsey County and the St. Paul Police, and every day I'm grateful to live on this side of the river for the compassion that we hear today. And one thing I do want to say is, with public toilets and things like that, I think that that's possibly just a culture change that America needs to be ready for. Other countries have public toilets that are clean and tidy and give people a safe place to relieve themselves, all day long. And maybe we just haven't had that kind of culture here, but if we start, we could engender that kind of, care for those facilities that other places have seen. And then I also want to make a suggestion, which I'm sure that you've done, but I just want to make sure that folks know that, like Leah at Listening House and Mo, the provider at one of the providers at Catholic Charities Medical Center, they get letters and calls and comments from these homeless folks telling them how grateful they are, and that they, because they have this compassionate care, that they want to stay on their medication and they want to get back to work if they aren't working. And so making sure that we connect with those people directly because as the deputy mayor said, these are our neighbors, whether they live in homes or they live in their cars or they live in tents. They're all people who are here because they live here. And then finally, I have a question. I'm happy to take the answer to this question off the air, but I'm curious, with the change in the service provided at Freedom House with Listening House staff moving in there, what happened to the program that was in Freedom House, the sort of BLS skills training for entry into the fire department? And I can take that answer at another time if there's not time. But thank you again so much for the presentation. I really appreciate everyone's hard work on this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we are always open to suggestions. We learned a lot last year, and specifically from just developing deeper relationships with the very folks that we were trying to serve. How to better resource and provide those services. So always open for good suggestions. And then the program that was at Freedom House, we actually embedded that program into the operating fire stations. So that program is now embedded into the other fire stations.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
All right, any additional questions for the presenters today?
Mr. Chair, Ricardo Cervantes here. I just want to let everybody know that there's another resource available to you. I dropped it in the chat. So for 24/7 service, these are social workers who can come out and de-escalate, evaluate, and provide service to individuals in crisis. Of course, there may be times where you may need to call the police, but this is another option where you believe that they're not posing a threat to themselves or anybody else, or maybe they are, with traffic, and we want to have a different response. They are available to respond to those 24/7.
Commissioner Kantner?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you all know, we've had the Freedom House zoning before us, and it will be coming back before us again. One of the things in the zoning specifies that those services must be within a half a mile of an overnight shelter. And just looking at that, and I would love to hear from you about whether there might be a benefit to expanding the geographic area where those services could be located in the city, and just any thoughts you have on that.
Director Cervantes, I think I'll let you take that one. It seems a little bit more technical for me.
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. As I reading the language, I question that as well. One of the thoughts is, as I had mentioned, the criteria have been put together as we were looking at locations in the city, understanding that folks have limited ability for transportation. I believe that was like one of the thoughts, is to have it near these facilities where it'd be easy accessibility. But looking at need, their Listening House does have a daytime shelter on East 7th Street. And we know that from our data that there are pockets of need throughout the city. And some of those, until last year, I mean, we really, you were to look at where all the shelter was available to these individuals, it's centered around our downtown, right? And need is really, there are communities on the east side, there are communities on the west side, there are communities along the Mississippi that are all in need. So I would say that, the availability or the opportunity for us to provide this level of service where in our city it's needed is certainly worth considering.
Right. Any additional questions? All right, I'm not seeing any. I do want to thank the presenters for coming in and kind of giving us a more overview of sort of the larger issue that the city has been dealing with and how the city has responded. It certainly has helped me better understand the subject. As Commissioner Kantner noted, we had a long discussion at the last meeting with regards to a potential zoning issue or rezoning or permission to allow some of these facilities to continue to operate. And so this discussion certainly allows us to better be informed and educated on the subject. And so I want to thank the directors that came in, the people from the police department, and the deputy mayor for taking the time this morning to give us this presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So we will move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the Comprehensive Neighborhood Planning Committee. Commissioner Grill.
Hi, so we had one item on our last meeting, which was on Wednesday, and it was the Neighborhood Star proposals. And so the Neighborhood Star program awards loans and grants for capital improvement projects in St. Paul neighborhoods, and they're funded with 50% of the city's sales tax proceeds. There's lots of information on the city's website about the program, but the issue before us specifically was reviewing 74 proposals for their compliance with the comprehensive plan. So if you've been on the commission for a while, you'll remember that in previous years, we had basically a yes or no question. So staff would review the proposals and they would say either it was or was not compliant with the comprehensive plan. This year, staff went through and graded them on a rubric, and so they got a score generally between 3 and 5 for compliance with the plan. At our meeting, we reviewed the staff recommendations, and we did make some changes to those staff recommendations, which is why you got the revised version in your email yesterday. Generally, our revisions revolved around increasing the value of program, or increasing the count score of programs if they were in areas of concentrated financial poverty, or if they served primarily audiences that were located in areas of concentrated financial poverty. And that was the bulk of the changes that we made from the staff recommendation. Hopefully everybody had an opportunity to review the applications, but the measure before us today is basically to approve the spreadsheet and share it with the issue before us today is we are recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution and forward the plan and the spreadsheet for the Neighborhood Star proposals. And we can take questions, and staff is here as well.
And so I believe that's the motion that you would be making at this time, correct, Commissioner Grill?
Yes, the motion that I'd be making is for us to approve the ratings and the spreadsheets and then forward on the recommendations.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion?
Commissioner Thomas, I second.
All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. I do know that staff is available for questions, and it sounded like the committee did have a lot of in-depth discussion with regards to the spreadsheet and the applicants and the ratings that they received. So Sonia, I will abstain from a vote on this, but if you could take a roll call on it.
Okay, Commissioner Baker? Oh, he left.
I believe he left.
Yeah,
He
I'm
had to,
sorry.
sign out.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Pertry. Oh, he's not here. Sorry. Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman,
Yes.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Risborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood, Commissioner Riley, Commissioner Riley, Commissioner Taggia,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
unanimous with one abstention.
All right, so that motion is approved to approve the resolution providing comments to the Neighborhood Star Board regarding compliance with the comprehensive plan. Before moving on to the next item, Commissioner Grill, have you heard about the electric vehicle signage? I know we had laid that over a few commission meetings ago, and it had sounded like it was a priority, and then I don't think we've heard about it since.
Chair, no, that hasn't come back to the committee. I also don't have an item for the next meeting at this point, but I do see the director's hand is up.
Director Pereira.
Chair and commissioners, just to comment on that last question, staff in the not in PD, so other staff, city staff are working on a broader approach. There's questions that have been raised about how the city gets involved with sort of contracts related to signage where there's sponsorship happening. And this project has forced kind of the city staff, including city attorney's office, to look at this issue a little more holistically. And so they're coming up, city attorney's office are coming up with some approaches and potentially some language, whether it be ordinance language or other kind of policy language that will inform this project. So the actual what form this comes back in, we are not sure yet. Whether there's still a need for zoning ordinance amendments is a question. There may still be, but we're not entirely sure. So that's sort of the update, that we don't have much of an update, but there is work going on behind the scenes on this issue.
All right, thank you, Luis. The next item on the agenda is the Transportation Committee. Commissioner Risberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just a brief report. We have our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on this coming Monday. Should be an interesting discussion. It's an information item to learn more about the stormwater infrastructure extension from the former Ford site, the Highland Bridge project, for their stormwater feature as it goes under Mississippi River Boulevard to Hidden Falls and ultimately released into the Mississippi River. This is a project that's just started. It'll be completed in the early fall of this year. So I encourage everybody who's interested in learning more about that to please attend. And I also was pleased to hear that the City Council approved the Capital City Bikeway. That was an item that came before the Transportation Committee a few meetings ago, and that was consistent with our recommendation to the City Council. So I'm glad to see that move forward. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Risberg. Next item on the agenda is communications nominations. Commissioner Underwood.
Chair, I think she had to step away, but we don't have an update on that committee.
Thank you. Task Force and Liaison reports. I'll turn it over to Commissioner DeJoy and then Commissioner Grill.
Thank you. So the Hillcrest Redevelopment Master Plan Advisory Committee met on April 20th, and our next meeting is on May 18th. On the 20th, we saw several presentations. One was an update on from the Port Authority on design aesthetics and workforce agreements. And then the presentation was actually presented by LHB for the design aesthetic ideas that included public art and murals and green walls. And it was really beautiful, some of the ideas that are being presented. Also, we had a presentation about LEED and we're trying to get, right now we have applied to be pre-certified for LEED certification. And the presentation included green building policy, green space, conserving natural resources, access to transit, walkability, bikeability, energy and greenhouse emissions and such. So it was really exciting, all these presentations. And then also the carbon-free net zero update from Rick Carter at LHB. Coming up on May 18th is our next meeting where we'll talk about more of the engagement that's been done and what we're doing in the future, and then sustainability and other items. So that's my report. Oh, I also once again put the website in the chat. And I don't know, Bill, it looks like Bill might have some additional comments.
No, thank you for the very thorough summary, and apologies, there's a late breaking change to the agenda. The sustainability policy will not be ready for this Tuesday. We'll have to wait till June to talk about that, but everything else you said is spot on. Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for Commissioner DeJoy or Mr. Dermody? Commissioner Grill?
So the Riverview Corridor Station Area Planning Task Force had its first meeting on May 4th. It was generally an introduction meeting. So we went through the members of the committee, information from the consulting teams in the county. We looked at an overview of what station area planning is and a very high level schedule for the next couple of years. It was a very introductory meeting, and I would imagine we get more into the details in future meetings. Our next meeting will be June 8th. And at that meeting, they will be electing a co-chair for me on the committee. And that is it.
Thank you. Moving on to old business and then new business. The new business being anything that a commissioner would want to add at the next agenda. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn the May 14, 2021 St. Paul Planning Commission meeting. Thanks everybody for attending and for your thoughtful questions on the issue of homelessness in the presentation. And we hope everybody enjoys their weekend. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.